Hi, and welcome back to Ronnie the Reader. In today's video, oh, there is a cat. In today's video, we are going to be talking about some books and book series that I think would make really good adaptations. I feel like this video is kind of a classic booktube type video that doesn't get made that much anymore. At least I don't see too many, so I really wanted to kind of dive into this, as it's something that I think about a lot when reading a book. I think a lot of people do, is how would this book be adapted? What are the things that would be left out? What are things that would be added? Just like, what are the things that would be changed from kind of book to screen, whether that is a movie or a TV show? So I have 5 things here. Some are standalones, some are series that I want to talk about that I think would be really good adaptations, what I think it would be good to be adapted on, whether that's movie, TV, streaming, cable, whatever it might be. So first up, we have Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is a book series I just recently finished reading this series for the first time. It's a trilogy. It's a YA space opera. This first book is following 2 characters named Katie and Ezra who escape the invasion of their planet, Carenza 4. So Illuminae is a really good space opera-esque story that kind of meets thriller. There's a lot of twists and turns that happen in this. And I think it would just be an exciting adaptation. Definitely a TV series. I think you could easily adapt all 3 books. And I think an interesting format for this, because the books are told in more of a dossier type of storytelling. It's not a straight narrative. There are it's a little fast, but there's different ways that the story is told in this particular book. So I think it could make for just an interesting storytelling opportunity, whether that be kind of flashbacks / flash forwards, or kind of cuts to the trial, even, because there is a trial that is a large looming part of all 3 of the books within the series. And I think that could be a really interesting framing device. Something that I wish that the series did a little bit more was be a little bit more adult. So I would hope that if this were ever to be adapted, that would be a little bit darker, a little bit edgier, didn't have to have that kind of YA, spin to it so much, especially if this landed on something like an HBO Max or a Showtime or something like that. But if it were a cable type show, even on the Sci-Fi Channel, I think it could hold up well. I hear that Sci-Fi, I think, did a really good job with The Expanse. I haven't started watching that yet because I do want to read the books before I watch The Expanse television series. But if they could do that, I think that they could do Illuminae well. Now let's talk about Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. This book is a mixture of Haunting of Hill House mixed with almost the Virgin Suicides. It's a very gothic story that is in 2 timelines. You have one timeline that is set in 1902 at this boarding school, and these girls are at the boarding school and they're obsessed with Mary McLean. And then you have a modern day storyline where there's actually being a movie being made, sucker for the flashback, flash forward kind of scenario. So the parallel stories, I think, would be really interesting. This would make a really good miniseries. At first, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, this would be an interesting movie, but I think there's just so much character depth and richness within this novel. This was my favorite book that I read last year. That a miniseries, a good, probably 6 to 8 episodes is really all you needed. And once again, something like a streaming service like an HBO Max or a Showtime, or maybe even a Netflix, although I don't have that much confidence in Netflix to adapt that many things. I think something like an HBO or Showtime are really the perfect place for this, and the perfect place for this to be a mini series, and it could be as dark as it gets, and as kind of that gothic vibe can be really brought to life with high set design and really good costuming. I would absolutely love to see it. All right, and next up, we're going to be talking about the book that I think would make a really good movie on this list, and that is All That's Left in the World by Eric J. Brown. This is a YA post-apocalyptic thriller, but ultimately love story about 2 boys named Ben and Andrew who meet after this pandemic has kind of wiped out a lot of the world. They are specifically living on the East Coast of the United States, and so the story is following them as they're traveling down the coast. And there's just a lot of like set pieces that could be really good pacing for this movie, that you could do it as like a miniseries, but I just don't know if it's all there. I think a really compact like 2-hour movie would do this story justice, as long as you cast really talented actors in the main two roles, which, as far as casting, I did not go that far in this video, so I don't have any like fan cast or people that I even would think of to play really any of the characters that I'm talking about today. Really about kind of the change that you go through as someone who's experiencing trauma in real time, and what that does to a person after they've kind of lost their whole family and then have more of like a found family situation. All of your classic post-apocalyptic kind of thriller tropes are kind of in here, but I just think this book was written so well. I have to say, I did try to read the sequel, All the Light That's Left Burning, and I think I got maybe 50 pages in, and I just didn't like it, and I didn't need it. I really loved the way that All That's Left in the World concluded its story, so while there is a sequel, personally, as someone who hasn't read it, I don't think you need it. I think just this is fine, and this would make a good standalone film. All right, and next up we have A Darker Shade of Magic, or Shades of Magic series, I think is what this is called, by E.E. Schwab. This first book, A Darker Shade of Magic, is following a character named Kel who can jump between parallel Londons. There's Red London, Black London, Grey London, and White London, I believe. And all of them have kind of different levels of magic. Jumping between these different parallel Londons is really like adventurous, and it's really wide scoping. And I think the contrast between the different Londons could make for really interesting visuals. This one I see really, even though I talked bad about them just a little bit ago, I think that this is kind of the perfect series that could be on Netflix. In a lot of ways, this sort of reminded me of like Shadow and Bone, and they did, from what I hear, a good job of adapting that over on Netflix. So this is a trilogy, an adult kind of fantasy trilogy. Characters are really complex, and there's a lot of changing and shifting dynamics as you go throughout the books in the world, and just the idea of like a magical world and different Londons, I think would just be fun to watch, and I would like to see this be adapted. All right, last but certainly not least, we have the Gone series by Michael Grant. The series follows these teenagers in a town that is essentially cut off when like a bubble kind of comes over it, and everyone above the age of 15 disappears from the town, and you're just left with 15 and under. And so when I first heard about this book, it was from the Readables, Priscilla, the Readables, who has not made a video, I think, in probably 10 years, but who I used to love and was one of my favorite OG booktubers. But she was doing a bookshelf tour, and she got to this series, and she said that it was Degrassi meets X-Men, and instantly I was sold, as someone who loved Degrassi as a kid and loved X-Men and still like X-Men to this day. This just instantly hooked me, and I've read the first 3 books when I was in high school, and then I read the last 3 when I was in college, and still loved it. I still love the series. I think it ended really well. And there's 6 books, so it could make for a really interesting story. You could, make this really as short or as long as you want. While each book is set in kind of distinct time, I think it would make sense to adapt each book into different seasons, essentially. You could condense them potentially, and kind of squeeze them down and kind of make them like half season type deals. But I think that just the series is something that we're kind of missing. And the closest that you could get to this personally and feeling, and something that I kind of side-eyed Netflix when it came out, but ultimately loved, was The Society. It was, I think, in 2019 when the show dropped, and it ultimately was a casualty of the pandemic, and the second season was canceled because of the pandemic. But that show follows a group of teenagers who go on a trip, and then when they return to town, like, everyone's disappeared. And they have to make like their own society and everything. And we loved it. Me and my roommates, we absolutely loved it. But it has a very similar premise to Gone. And I know that Netflix was working on an adaptation of Gone. So a little shady, definitely. But ultimately, book that I think, in a book series that I think would just be fun. Even as an adult, I'm almost 30. I think this would be so fun to watch. All right, so those are 5 books that I would love to see adapted in the future. Definitely let me know what you think and what books you would like to see adapted. Whether you want a movie, TV show. I know most of these, I think, would be like TV shows to miniseries. I just like shorter form, or I like longer form content in that way. I'm not like a huge movie watcher all of the time. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if any of these eventually do get adapted. I'm not hopeful. I don't know of any plans for any of these to be adapted, but we'll see. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will talk to you then. Bye.